The hardest decisions in life can feel remarkably easy when approached with the Kyudo rule. This method has been refined over generations in Japanese philosophy, creating clarity where confusion typically dominates. Three key principles form the foundation of this approach, each addressing a different aspect of decision-making that most people struggle with. But before we jump into that, let's examine why the typical ways we make important choices actually create more difficulty than they solve. Most people approach important decisions in ways that seem logical but actually create paralysis. They carefully list pros and cons, gather countless opinions, and analyze every possible outcome, yet end up more confused than when they started. Why do these logical methods often fail when we need them most? The answer lies not in the methods themselves, but in how they affect our decision-making system. Our bodies hold valuable decision-making intelligence that logical analysis alone cannot access. When we rely solely on mental computation, we miss the subtle cues that guide truly effective choices. This mind-body disconnect explains why more analysis often produces less clarity. While Western decision frameworks pile on complexity, more data, more options, more variables to consider, the Kyudo rule works in the opposite direction. It strips away obstacles between you and clarity, creating space for wisdom to emerge naturally rather than forcing it through mental strain. The approach begins with a counterintuitive step that many decision makers never consider. This first principle of the Kyudo rule addresses the root cause of decision anxiety rather than merely treating its symptoms. The first principle of the Kyudo rule is mushin, the empty mind. In traditional Kyudo practice, archers would clear their minds of all distractions before drawing the bow. They discovered that a quiet mind led to perfect shots, while a busy mind caused them to miss the target. This same principle applies directly to decision-making. To achieve this mental clarity, try this simple technique. Set a timer for 2 minutes and focus only on your breathing. When thoughts about your decision arise, and they will, simply notice them without judgment and return to your breath. Take Luigi, who needed to decide whether to accept a job offer in another city. His mind was filled with endless pros and cons, family opinions, and fearful what-ifs. After practicing the empty mind technique for just 5 minutes, he noticed how many of his thoughts were based on fear rather than reality. But what happens when you've cleared your mind and still face multiple options? Having mental clarity helps, but sometimes the choice itself remains challenging. This brings us to the second principle, which transforms how you view the options themselves. The second principle of the Kyudo rule is the single arrow mindset. This means treating each option as if it were the only possibility available to you. Instead of constantly comparing choices side by side, you fully engage with one option at a time. When a Kyudo archer prepares to shoot, they focus entirely on the single arrow they're holding, not the ones in their quiver or the shots they took before. Each arrow exists in its own moment, demanding complete attention. This singular focus creates remarkable clarity. This approach short-circuits overthinking by eliminating the mental ping-pong that happens when we bounce between options. When you constantly switch between choices, you never fully explore any of them. Your mind remains divided, unable to reach the depth needed for a clear decision. To practice this mindset, try this technique. Take a single option you're considering and spend 5 minutes assuming it's your only choice. How would you make it work? What possibilities would open up? What steps would you take? Write these down without any thought of alternatives. Then repeat this process with each option separately, giving each one its full moment of consideration. Let's return to Luigi, who was also deciding between staying at his current job or starting his own business. Instead of making endless comparison lists, he dedicated one full day to imagining he had already decided to stay at his job. He noticed immediate relief about financial stability, but also a sense of disappointment he couldn't ignore. The next day, he lived fully in the mindset of having chosen entrepreneurship. The excitement he felt provided valuable information his pros and cons lists never revealed. These two principles, empty mind and single arrow mindset, alone can resolve many decision challenges. But the third principle is what truly sets the Kyudo rule apart from other decision methods. The third principle of the Kyudo rule is outcome detachment, caring deeply about your choice while releasing attachment to specific results. This might sound contradictory. How can you care about a decision but not care about its outcome? When a Kyudo archer releases the arrow, They have already accepted whatever outcome follows. Their focus remains on the perfect form, the right process, not on whether the arrow hits the exact center of the target. This mental posture creates freedom that leads to better results, not worse ones. Outcome attachment creates decision paralysis because our minds become overwhelmed trying to control the uncontrollable. We imagine countless future scenarios, each with its own consequences, leading to mental gridlock. When we release this attachment, we see more clearly what matters in the present moment. This doesn't mean becoming careless or apathetic. Rather, it means shifting focus from trying to control every future result to making the best choice based on what you know now. The paradox is that by letting go of outcome control, you often make better decisions that lead to better outcomes. To practice this principle, try this technique. For each possible decision, think what you can control and what you cannot. Then, focus your energy only on the elements within your control. Let's see how Luigi applied this to his career decision. He realized he couldn't control whether his business would succeed, if the market would change, or if he'd regret leaving his job. What he could control was his work ethic, his willingness to learn, and his daily actions. By releasing attachment to guaranteed success and focusing on these controllable elements, his path became surprisingly clear. The entrepreneurship option, which had seemed risky and uncertain, now felt like a natural choice he could make confidently. These three principles together, empty mind, single arrow mindset, and outcome detachment, are the first step to fully understand the Kyudo method for decision-making. Each principle addresses a different aspect of what makes decisions difficult, but their true power emerges when used together, which brings us to the process on how to truly apply this method in your daily life. Begin by creating a quiet space, both physically and mentally. This doesn't require rigid meditation or perfect conditions. Simply find somewhere you won't be interrupted and let your mind gradually empty of the mental chatter surrounding your decision. Some people find this happens naturally during a walk, while others prefer sitting quietly. The form matters less than the feeling of mental spaciousness that emerges. As your mind clears, turn your attention to one option. Instead of analyzing it, simply inhabit it. What would this choice feel like if you had already made it? Does this path create a sense of expansion or contraction? Trust these responses. They contain wisdom your analytical mind cannot access. Then move to the next option with the same presence, giving it your complete attention. Throughout this exploration, practice holding your options lightly. Notice when you begin clutching at specific outcomes or trying to control future results. Gently remind yourself that your responsibility is to make the best choice with what you know now, not to predict or control every consequence that follows. People find this method particularly valuable when facing life's crossroads, those decisions that shape your path in meaningful ways. It works remarkably well for career pivots, relationship commitments, relocations, or any choice where you feel the weight of consequence. The Kyudo rule becomes even more powerful when you're caught between equally appealing options, or when you've been circling a decision for so long that every path has become blurred. But what about those situations where no option seems good? What about true dilemmas where every path involves loss or sacrifice? Let's see how the Kyudo rule transforms even these impossible choices. Consider the famous trolley problem from ethics, a thought experiment where you must choose between letting a runaway trolley kill 5 people or diverting it to kill one of your loved ones instead. This moral dilemma has no perfect answer, only impossible choices. In real life, we face our own versions of impossible decisions. During World War II, British codebreakers at Bletchley Park deciphered information about upcoming German bombing raids. However, acting on every piece of intelligence would have revealed they had broken the German code, potentially costing more lives in the long run. Leaders had to make the unthinkable choice of sometimes allowing attacks to proceed to protect their intelligence advantage. The Kyudo rule offers unique value in these impossible situations. When facing such dilemmas, most people become paralyzed by the weight of consequences or trapped in endless loops of what-ifs. Their thinking becomes increasingly fragmented as they try to find a perfect solution that doesn't exist. Through Mushin, you create space to acknowledge the reality of your situation without being overwhelmed by it. The single arrow mindset allows you to fully consider each difficult option without constantly comparing it to equally problematic alternatives. Outcome detachment helps you release the impossible burden of trying to control all consequences of an inherently imperfect choice. Let's return to Luigi, who faced his own impossible decision. His mother needed expensive medical care, but paying for it would mean abandoning his dream business, which was finally gaining traction after years of struggle. Every option involved significant loss. Before applying the Kyudo rule, Luigi was consumed by anxiety. He couldn't sleep, constantly calculating and recalculating financial scenarios, and feeling guilty no matter which direction he leaned. After practicing the three principles, he found a surprising clarity. The solution Luigi discovered was to temporarily scale back his business rather than abandoning it completely. He negotiated with his two key employees to become partial owners with profit sharing, allowing them to maintain operations while he reduced his hours to part-time. With his remaining time, he took on consulting work in his field, which actually paid better hourly than his business currently did, and used that income to cover his mother's medical expenses. This arrangement allowed him to honor his commitment to both his family and his dream, though in a modified form he hadn't previously considered. While his situation remained challenging, the impossible choice between business or family transformed into a creative third path he couldn't see when overwhelmed by anxiety and rigid thinking. Even impossible decisions become manageable through this approach. Now let's address the most common obstacles you will 100% face when applying this method. First, you might wonder, but what if I need to consider many factors, finances, relationships, career implications? Rather than trying to juggle all factors simultaneously, the empty mind creates space to see which factors truly matter. When you consider each option through the single arrow mindset, the essential considerations naturally rise to the surface. Second, some ask, what about truly consequential decisions? This approach seems too simple. The Kyudo rule isn't simple because the decisions are simple. It's simple because simplicity cuts through paralysis. The most consequential decisions actually benefit most from this approach. When stakes are high, our minds become cluttered with fear and projection. These principles create the mental environment needed to make important choices from a place of clarity rather than anxiety. Finally, you might worry, how do I know I'm not just avoiding responsibility by detaching from outcomes? Outcome detachment isn't avoidance, it's the opposite. You're taking full responsibility for what you can control while acknowledging what you cannot control, every future consequence. This actually represents a more mature approach to responsibility than the illusion that perfect analysis can guarantee perfect results. By addressing these common concerns head-on, you'll find yourself more capable of applying this method when it matters most. Remember that the goal isn't perfect decisions. It's clear decisions made with a settled mind. Even the best choices can lead to unexpected challenges, and seemingly poor choices sometimes open doors we never anticipated. The next time you face a paralyzing choice, approach it like the Kyudo archer. Clear mind, single focus, detached from outcome, and watch as the decision becomes surprisingly clear. And now, the algorithm thinks that you would also enjoy this next video.